Hey guys, it's LOL underscore Rybun or Rybun here, and today we're going to be covering a video that should hopefully summarize kind of the contents of a few of my videos put into one in a compressed manner that is easy to digest and be helpful to you all, and that is what I will be titling Progression of Heroes of Hammerwatch. Very loosely, what we'll be going over in this video is the very start of the game to the presumable end of the game in my personal experiences and how I think you progress and what the best things to do are to get further and everything you can work on to do so. So without further ado, we'll start the video. The first set of progression you can do in Heroes of Hammerwatch is beating the base game. Now to me, the base game implies beating Forsaken Tower, not Pyramids of Prophecy, not Moon Temple, neither the DLC maps, but instead beating the base game map, that is the Forsaken Tower. To beat the Forsaken Tower, there are quite a few things available to you that realistically progress you throughout. First of all, there's leveling up your skills, which includes, the next thing, which is unlocking features such as the Guild Hall, which will allow you to get higher levels on your skills. I personally recommend doing passives and your primary attack over the active skills in terms of early progression, specifically because with a lot of skills, your mana costs will go up and your damage may go up, but you're going to be able to use them less. So if you were able to clear a whole room with that one of that ability before, well, now it just costs more, which means you're less likely to use it more often. So it's usually not as good as leaving them where you can use them more often in case you get stuck and you need an escape or a heal or something like that. That's not always the case, but that's just my personal experience. I feel like passives and the primary attack have the most consistent benefits to your runs when you upgrade them. The next thing you can do is upgrading any of the things that you unlock via upgrading your town. The blacksmith, for example, or maybe you unlock drinks and you can get drinks now, or the apothecary, any of those things. The last thing that kind of falls in that same realm is the purchasing upgrades and buying items for your runs, determining what items work best for you. The guides that you may find online may be a little bit inaccurate because they're usually assuming you have drinks. And if you don't have drinks, a lot of the things don't work as well as they would otherwise. For example, Lucky Hat is great for a lot of builds because it helps your crit chance, it helps your evade chance, it helps your chances in general, such as your chance to proc Frenetic Eruption. Well, if you don't have Frenetic Eruption, maybe something like Judgment may be better, which adds base damage and gives you an extra effect on your attacks. Stuff like that. That's how I would recommend beating the base game. As you go along, you'll get better. You'll learn more about your characters. You'll get more exposure to all the things that are in the game. You'll get better at traps. But there's those things that I just listed before are the things you can level up just by playing the game, getting these upgrades and benefits and stuff to make it easier on you, so it's less based on you just being very good at the game. The second part of the game you'll have to progress through is climbing through the NGs, more specifically NG 1 and 2, as these are the NGs that you unlock a lot of the key features in Heroes of Hammerwatch for progression. These are realistically mainly blueprints and drinks, because you'll be able to find higher tier blueprints and drinks throughout these two NGs. At NG 1, you unlock green drinks and green blueprints, and in NG2 you'll unlock the blue versions of both, whereas in NG0 you just have access to the white ones. This grind is a very, very long one. If you don't have the right luck, really, you won't be able to find these things as fast as you want to, and it may take a very long time to assemble the collection of drinks and or blueprints for items that you want to attune, so that you can further along your runs. Once you have gotten these items, in a lot of cases for primary builds it'll be Heartseeker, Lucky Hat, and for skill builds you'll want Lucky Hat as well, but also Staff of Volatile Casting, and some of the key drinks like Frenetic Eruption, wicked sickness, incendiary demise, evil infusion, overflowing physique. I think I covered most of them there. Once you get drinks like these, you'll be able to push your way through these NGs and even the further NGs very, very quickly. But this section of the game, quite literally, is mainly finding the blueprints and the blueprints for the items and the drinks. You're gonna have a little bit of trouble with this for a very long time, and it'll feel like a slow grind. But once you've achieved the stuff, I promise you, you will fly through. You'll go through this game really, really quickly. In terms of how to progress in this stage, there's two things that are very, very key, which are finding the blueprints you want and finding the drinks that you want. The other parts that kind of go off of this are attuning the items once you've found the blueprints for them, as well as, you know, figuring out what drinks you want to run. And last but not least, I think you should at least buy the first level of a few statues so that you can run them. In order to get these statue blueprints, you'll have to run Pyramids of Prophecy campaigns and hopefully run into them. I personally would recommend Bolgarth and Kira for sure. And then based on if you're running a skill build or a primary build, you should run Cedric for skill and Callus for primary. Kira will give you extra attack speed and extra projectiles that'll occasionally come out on your primary attack. And Bolgarth will allow you to release it's not a Nova, but it's like a circle of damage. And it's very, very huge while you're in combo, and that'll help you push through. I don't recommend leveling up your statues a whole ton, for specifically the reason that it costs a lot of ore, and you may want to fund some of your other characters with that money so that you can get more class titles, which I think make a bigger impact at this stage of the game. That is it for this stage though. Good luck. The third stage of the game is really the rushing stage, is what I would call it. This is NGs probably 3 through 6, and then maybe some more based on how well you succeed. Once you've achieved finding all the blueprints and the drinks, this stage really has the simple progression of just running the runs. The first time I got all my drinks and my blueprints, I was able to run all the way to NG 8 with no additional effort into class titles, statues, or anything else. I was just able to keep pumping up my NG, and then I hit my first wall. My recommendation to you is to try to push as far as you can, and then if you make maybe like 2 failed runs, maybe 3, then you know you've probably hit a wall and you need to work on something else, which is where the last stage of this video comes in. Next, we fall into the last section of the game, which I like to call NG7+, since usually you'll be able to get to at least NG6 with the drinks and item attunements. This section is realistically all-encompassing. The rest of the game, you will be in this section, and you'll have many options available to you to push your characters to the next level. The first of which is, of course, class titles. Now, as you may know, pushing your character through NGs and bosses, granted you're not on NG1 at least yet on those characters, will give all of your other characters bonus stats. This varies from class to class, but there are things such as armor, resistance, attack power, skill crit damage, HP regen, mana regen, and I feel like I'm missing one. However, all of these things are bonus stats for your characters to push up and help each other through pushing through NGs. They're all very, very useful, especially the last one, which I forgot to mention, which is the Thief for gold gain, which makes you more able to always purchase items. All of these will help your characters along, and they're all very, very valuable, and there's no real price to pay other than putting in the time on each of your characters. This also makes your character, your main, presumably, feel a lot better, because you'll get to experience these other classes and then come back to the class you're comfortable with, the one that you really, really enjoy. It gives a little bit more flavor to the game because you're not just playing the same thing over and over and over again. It's really valuable both for your mental health as well as your character's progression, and it's really a great thing to do. The next thing is mob attunement. Now, I'd like to preface this by saying I prefer item attunement. I always will. Mob attunement's great, but there's a lot of items in this game that I feel like are more valuable to attune than to attune monsters. I think the point at which you start attuning mobs is the point at which you've already attuned most, if not all, of the items that you want to attune, and at which point it's probably a safe decision to make, and you probably want to start with bosses if that's where you're struggling. It really depends on where you're struggling, but this is more of a personal preference type thing. If you die a whole ton to blue wisps, then just attune blue wisps. They'll have a harder time killing you. And then maybe you find out, ooh, darn, I really suck against necromancers in Act 3. Well, then attune necromancers and go from there. Mob attunement lets you customize your runs to your personal quirks, if you will. Maybe you have issue with one mob that your friend thinks is a useless mob. Well, I mean, that's all up to personal preference, and you can all attune things differently. The next thing is item attunement, which was kind of previously mentioned. I think this is the most valuable one. You'll find lots and lots of benefits in attuning items because doubling their stats in a lot of cases is really, really powerful, and it's just a really, really good thing to do. I would recommend attuning items in the order of luck first. I like evasion and crit hit chance, whether it be skill or just primary based on whatever you're playing. And then I usually prioritize defensive stats such as armor or resistance based on which you're more lacking on. After which, everything else is kind of a go. I like percent chance items a lot, and then afterwards it's really just anything. But that's kind of my priority, but you may have a different priority. Again, it's all up to you. It's all up to personal preference, but I just make sure that you attune your items before your mobs. That's just my personal experience. Realistically, it's up to you though to decide what you prefer. One of the last huge things I would say is leveling your statues. Pyramids of Prophecy is one of the most powerful DLCs because it gives you access to statues, which can do amazing things for your runs. You've got statues like Cedric and Callus, which turn your resistance stats like resistance and armor into stuff like attack power and skill power to push your offensive and defensive potentials at the same time. You've got stuff like Wilmer, which allows you to change your ability's damage based on how much mana it costs to make it hit even harder. You've got stuff like Kira, which gives you extra projectiles in your primary. You've got so many statues, so many options to push your runs to the next level by giving yourself more and more powerful both defensive stats, offensive stats, and unique stats. And all of these things are great, but they are very, very costly in terms of ore. Statues provide very big buffs, don't get me wrong, but a lot of times they're not really the most immediate way you can keep pushing further, but you'll definitely notice their benefits as you level them up, and they're a great way to spend your excess ore. There's one other thing that's really good, and it's also expensive, and that is the arena's little wooden sword points. These give you bonuses to your base stats like resistance, attack power, armor, and skill power. The one issue, however, is both that you have to play the arena, which has pretty low payouts, and also that these cost a lot of money because every single time you buy one, their price scales, and it scales really, really fast for the payout. I personally have not mucked around with this too much, and that's more so just personal preference than anything else. However, they are definitely stats you can get, and if you feel like doing something different, go for it. I think it's definitely something worth putting your time into. The last thing we'll cover, which is kind of a section of its own, are blood rites. Blood rites, as you may know, you lose some of your HP, but you gain bonus stats. And I'm going to do a section right now covering kind of why these are so important. All of us know blood rites give us stats and make us lose HP, but why are they useful? Blood rites get their usefulness predominantly from their ability to mitigate or lower the effects of higher NGs. And by this, I mean the amount of decay it puts on your run via your armor and resistance being tanked. At around 10 stacks of the blood rites of Immortality in Fey, you will be able to mitigate the armor and resistance reductions from NG plus until right about NG plus 100. Afterwards, you'll just have to grab one more of each to mitigate for a very long another period of time. This is because blood rates scale at a flat rate, and NG levels scale exponentially. So as you go up, they're going to scale a little bit faster over time, and blood rates are just going to keep scaling at that flat rate. So eventually you'll have to get more and more of them. Simply put though, assuming you're able to roll only Immortal and Fey, i.e. you get really, really lucky, and you're able to get just 20 blood rights, you will be able to trade 88% of your total HP, meaning you have about 12% remaining, for a permanent non-negative armor and non-negative resistance, which will in turn reduce the damage that you take from mobs rather than increasing it. And ultimately, your relative HP to the damage that you are taking will actually go up. So let's say you have 1000 HP and you're taking damage from, oh geez, I don't know. Let's say you take 100 damage. Well, in NG plus 80, if you don't have the blood rights, maybe this is amplified by 1000%. I don't have actual numbers here, but let's just say this is the case. Then you're going to be taking 1000 damage. Let's say you have 1000 HP, that'll kill you, right? Well, if you sacrifice 12% of your HP, or 88%, so you have 12%, you have 120 HP. Instead of get the 100 damage getting amplified by, 1000%, maybe it gets reduced by, let's be generous and give out a low number, like 40%. So if it gets reduced by 40%, you're getting hit by 60, which instead of doing your full health and then some, will do about half your health. Now, I'm going to give you a direct example of this later on in the video. So, ignore my relative numbers. I'll show you exactly how powerful it is in a second. But that is just the resistance part of it. Now, the thing that we need to remember is earlier we talked about statues. And statues like Cedric and Callus transport your armor and resistance stats into offensive stats. So if you're gaining all of these resistance stats to keep you alive, you're also getting stronger offensively because of your statues. And these, through level ups, will affect your blood rights exponentially in terms of what they give you in terms of offensive stats. Because of this, blood rights can help you power through NG levels. Now, this is all being very optimistic. Let's assume you're not so lucky. Let's assume to get 10 of Immortal and Fey, you have to get 10 of every other blood right. There's 6 of them, so we're talking that you'll be left with about 2% of your actual health. The downsides of this, of course, are, well, instead of having 12%, you have 2%. Relative to that, you're at 1/6 of the HP that you could optimistically get, and at 1/50th of your original HP. Well, what do you get in return? Well, you get the armor and resistance stats that we talked about earlier. You're still going to have positive armor resistance. On top of that, you'll have really high HP regeneration, really high mana regeneration, really high attack power, and really high skill power. Through all of these, you will be stronger than you would be if you just got the Immortal and the Fey. However, because your HP is so much lower, you're really at a disadvantage, right? Well, actually, as it turns out, because you can get HP regen from Blood Rite of the Order, the lower your HP gets, the higher percent Blood Rite of the Order is going to be healing you for, because there's less HP to be healed. While you're taking less damage, let's say you go down to 30 HP and something's going to hit you for like 6, well, maybe you have 30 plus HP regen. That 6 damage just immediately goes away in 0.2 seconds. It's just gone. Because of this, I would not say this is stronger than the previous case. However, it's probably still viable. Now, I'm talking about all this from personal mathematical calculations and not experience itself. However, for this video today, I have specifically prepared for you a profile with 10 immortal and phase, and in that same profile I will then end my run in a loss and show you the effects of relative damage to my character, and we will explore how effective that is. So stay tuned for that. Here it is, the character with a whole ton of blood rates. Now I will note there are three screw ups in this. So we actually have 3 excess outside of the defensive ones. So we're sitting at 23 blood rates. However, we do have 10 Fey and 10 Immortal within this list. You'll have to take my word for it. But we're going to look at the stats and cover why this works and how it also doesn't work. The first thing to be noted is that we are currently in NG0, and as such, our HP is very low. Our armor and resistances are okay. They're better than usual, but realistically, because our HP is so low, they're really not all that great compared to what we normally have. Now, I've gone ahead and calculated the relative HP that this character has based on their damage reduction and health, and we're sitting at roughly 788.88 repeating HP, which means roughly we can take 788 base damage from anything. That is pretty okay. Now, how does that compare to a normal character? Well, quite literally, the same character has 794 health with 83% resistance to it, which in turn means that the relative HP in terms of physical damage on this character is actually 4,670.58, which is a whole ton more than the character with all the blood rights. Well, why is that? Well, that's because blood rights scale with NG, but the HP scaling, the downscaling, does not. So because of this, we get a kind of weird situation. Now, I'll talk about that in a second when I show you the HP relativity in NG, I don't know, 22. Now, here's where we'll get to see why blood rates are so powerful. And that's because we are currently in NG plus 22 with a positive 294 armor and positive 310 resistance, because our blood rates simply give more than what NG22 takes away. Because of this, we're still decreasing physical damage taken by 85% and decreasing magic damage taken by 86%. Now, our relative HP when looking at armor in NG22 is 473.33 repeating, which is approximately, roughly minus 300 from our NG0 HP with this character. Now that sounds bad. The HP went down. I thought it was supposed to be better, right? Well, let's take a look at our friend in NG22 without blood rights. And here we are. NG22, no blood rights. Well, these are really negative resistances, aren't they? Yeah, and in fact, they decrease the physical damage taken by negative 792%, which means we're taking roughly 8 times the damage that we would be taking otherwise. Well, simple math, if you call this 800 and you call this 8 times, which would be rounding, we're sitting at about 100 HP. Well, it turns out if you actually do the math, we're sitting at relative HP with regards to physical damage, 100.25 HP. Now, if you remember, the character with blood rights has 473.33 repeating relative HP, which is almost 5 times as much HP as this character. Now, like we said earlier, that's not the only benefit. You'll also notice that this character has 200 skill power. Let's go take a look at our friend in NG22 with blood rights. Well, our friend in NG22 with blood rights has a mere 340 more skill power, specifically from Cedric alone. And I believe I have level 10 Cedric. Imagine if that was level 20. It'd be even more significant. So not only do I have 4 to 5 times the HP of my other character, I also have way more damage. Yes, that's correct. And that's why later on in the game, blood rites have potential to take you through the rest of the game with no problems, make a huge difference. And think of it this way, this is only at NG 22. The scaling will only get better for what you gain compared to what you lost. So this is why the further you get, the more powerful blood rites are. And with that, I feel like I've covered everything there is to know about progression. Now, progression as a whole is sometimes a little bit hard, a little bit tricky, and a lot of work. But in the end, you'll always progress because this is a roguelite. And while you're progressing, you'll get to have more and more challenges, more and more fun, and I hope you'll thoroughly enjoy this game that is Heroes of Hammerwatch. If you have any questions of anything regarding to any of this or anything I covered in this video, any concerns, any feedback, something you disagree with, please let me know. I may not be completely right on everything. These are my personal experiences and what I know about the game. I'm not claiming to be 100% right on everything, but I hope you'll find this information helpful in helping you through the game. Thank you so much for watching as always. If you have any video suggestions or anything like that, please let me know down in the comments below. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.